I talk a lot about my enthusiasm for multi-day outdoor projects, and I've mentioned how rewarding simple indoor DIY projects like installing new curtain rods or hanging up cool new heavy-duty curtains or fixing a broken toilet can be. But like everyone, I'm a work in progress, and I've noticed that my motivation and discipline can falter with some multi-day indoor projects that feel more like chores than challenges. For example, whenever I've moved houses, I tend to go on a 14-hour tear to get unpacking done for the first day. Maybe that enthusiasm even carries over to the second day. But on day 3, there are usually still some boxes that remain unpacked, and they will sit in a room for months, maybe even for over a year, nagging at me every time I walk past that room, which I really can't use for any other meaningful purpose as long as those darn leftover boxes are still sitting there. It would take another 5 or 6 hours to finish and move on, and yet it isn't until some early spring morning when I finally had it, and I reprimand myself for being so absurd, and I finally just take care of it at last, 11 months after the fact. Or my current project with a master bedroom shower. As planned, it was a multi-step endeavor, including getting a new water heater, which, full disclosure, I did engage a professional to do, and then installing new hardware, deep cleaning some of the nasty-looking water stains and mildew that had been there since I moved in, and then finally regrouting the tiles, which were in pretty rough shape. Now, explain to me why I powered through the first 3 steps, but the expensive grout and tools have been sitting in my storage area for almost 6 months now. Again, nagging at me and removing some of the joy and gratification of completing a super overhaul of a shower that gets used every single day because there's always an excuse. It doesn't have to be home improvement projects. Maybe you can relate because you have a superb idea for a new business and you snag the LLC name, start Googling potential manufacturers or vendors, and you decide to begin to draft a business plan to assist with obtaining financing sources. But then the process stagnates before you've completed so much as the executive summary, and with it, the entire business idea sits in limbo indefinitely. Or maybe you decide that this is the year you're going to complete a half marathon. You buy the new shoes and the gym membership so you can keep training on a treadmill during inclement weather, and you build muscle to support your body throughout the longer distances. You research training plans and you pick out your target race. You even start going for 3-mile runs 3 times a week. But you just can't seem to coax yourself into doing any of the weekend long runs over 7 miles, no matter how you try to bribe yourself, and no matter how quickly the race date is approaching. This isn't a revolutionary insight, of course. The fact that the gym is packed the first few days after New Year's and then back to normal 3 weeks later, or really any observation about how New Year's resolutions seem destined to fail, it's a tired trope at this point. But I want to explore why people struggle with this for little things like regrouting a shower, just as much as for big goals like saving up for a down payment on a house. Motivation matters, but it's unreliable. Discipline is what carries a project through the long, unglamorous middle. And wisdom is knowing when finishing is character building versus when quitting is actually the more intelligent act. Let's talk about it. The first day of moving into a new place is fueled by novelty, urgency, and adrenaline. The first phases of a bathroom overhaul are satisfying because each step feels visible and finite. The first week of mapping out a business idea is thrilling because the possibility is limitless and it costs nothing. The first few runs toward a half marathon are fun because the identity shift is beginning. But the middle phase of a project or goal is different, regardless of whether it emerges after a few weeks, a few days, or just a couple of hours. The novelty has faded, boredom and monotony can kick in, or other forms of friction emerge, and the same amount of effort might bring less visible or immediate rewards. Motivation gets you to buy the grout, but discipline is what gets you on your hands and knees, scraping and sponging, even when the siren song of your lawnmower beckons on a sunny Saturday. This need for ongoing discipline mid-project is counterintuitive in some ways because most people find unfinished or interrupted projects to be mentally taxing. When I think about how irritating those moving boxes were, it's baffling that it took so long for me to unpack them, clean up, and alleviate that mental load. Every time I stepped into the shower, so daily, if not twice daily, depending on my workout and yard work schedule, I was reminded that this stupid project has been pending for months now. Sometimes the most exhausting part of a project is not doing it. It's living next to it half done. Unfinished projects do not just take up space in your house, they take up space in your head. But that middle zone still seems to be where procrastination shows up most often. It's more complicated than simple laziness. I wasn't avoiding regrouting in order to bed rot or to hit the bars with my friends. In my head, I had blown up the task into something that was going to involve yucky chemical smells, time indoors hunched over on a tile floor, and other annoyance and inconvenience, and it was so easy to justify postponing it for yet another week because there's always something else that needs tending to. So this isn't a time management problem, it's an emotion management one. It's the quintessential example of why discipline matters more than motivation. Stoicism has no patience for the modern fantasy that you should wait until you feel like it. Whether or not I feel motivated today is irrelevant. The question is whether this is a thing worth doing, and if it is, am I the kind of person who will govern myself accordingly? The answers should usually be yes, and a resounding yes. Now, with that said, sometimes the answer to that first question is no. Sometimes there's a project or goal that is no longer worthy of your time, energy, and effort, and persistence is actually just stubbornness or pride or vanity. I have a few videos on this over on my Legal Consideration channel. Suffice to say, some of the most important changes in my life occurred when I recognized sunk costs, whether that was of time, money, or effort, realized that my discipline and perseverance was crossing over into mindless stubbornness, and then I pivoted. This was the genesis behind my identity shift from a soccer player to a swimmer, and from a guitar player to a drummer, and from perpetually disrespected of counsel at an unworthy firm to principal attorney and business owner of multiple companies. It takes wisdom to determine whether you're feeling the discomfort that is the price of progress toward any worthy goal and merits pushing on, versus when the evidence is screaming that the underlying goal, method, or economics no longer makes sense and you should pivot. Alas, the wisdom to discern the difference between when you ought to see something through and when you'd be throwing good resources after bad is best gained through experience. But for most people, the most immediate and detrimental issue is half-finished projects and abandoned goals. This creates an identity leak that quietly says, I'm the kind of person who likes the fantasy more than the finish, or I start stronger than I sustain. If YouTube's algorithm has brought you to my videos, that is going to be painful because most likely you are the kind of person who is, or who at least wants to become, or who wants to see yourself as, competent, serious, efficacious, and self-sufficient. But the encouraging flip side of that is that every completed project, even the small ones, repairs that identity leak, builds self-trust, and turns you into the kind of person who can believe your own promises and commitments to yourself. All right, if you've made it to the end of this video, you're awesome. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Liking and subscribing really helps this new channel and also helps me determine what types of content you might find helpful or interesting. If you are a business owner, creative professional, lawyer, entrepreneur, or in corporate, please check out my other YouTube channel, Legal Consideration, or visit legalconsideration.com to accelerate your own learning on all things law, business, and finance. You can also buy my newest fiction novel, Where Ice Meets Sky, available on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, and at select bookstores. It's an Odyssey-inspired Arctic survival and adventure story about courage, resilience, and leadership amidst impossible odds for a young adult audience, but with adult crossover appeal. I never show the back. Even if you don't do any of those things, I still appreciate you for tuning into this episode. Until our next project, stay heavy and stay handy.